There are moments in a man's life when a single sentence forces him to confront the truth he's been avoiding. Not a dramatic betrayal, not a catastrophic fight, but a quiet string of words delivered with surgical precision. Words that don't just sting but expose everything she really thinks about you. Most men ignore them. They rationalize them. They pretend they didn't hear what they heard. But once these phrases are spoken, the relationship is no longer a relationship. It becomes a negotiation for your dignity. And the tragedy is that too many men stay long after the warning signs have screamed themselves hoarse. The truth you're about to face isn't comfortable. It isn't polite. It isn't wrapped in soft language or empathy. It's the truth men see only after the damage is done, after years wasted, after the last piece of self-respect has been bargained away. These phrases are not accidents. They are not emotional slip-ups. They are revelations. They are the moment the mask cracks wide open, showing you the contempt she's kept carefully hidden behind sweetness, affection, or performative vulnerability. A woman who loves you can get angry. She can be emotional. She can be overwhelmed. But a woman who loves you will never weaponize your masculinity, your humanity, or your devotion. These phrases aren't born from emotion. They come from calculation. And once you hear them, you can't pretend they mean anything less than what they reveal. A real man would. Those 4 words carry centuries of male insecurity condensed into a single blade, and she knows exactly where to stab with it. She will say it casually, almost lazily, as if she's commenting on the weather, but she knows the effect. A real man would buy me that. A real man would understand. A real man wouldn't question me. None of this is about manhood. It's about obedience. She's not appealing to who you truly are. She's appealing to the part of you that still believes you must prove something. She's reaching into that primitive part of every man that wonders if he's enough, and she's twisting. You want to know the truth behind that phrase. She doesn't want a real man. She wants a controlled man, a programmable man, a man who sacrifices himself to meet whatever standard she invents that day. The definition shifts with her desires. One moment masculinity means providing. The next it means staying silent. The next it means swallowing humiliation. The next it means tolerating things no dignified man should ever tolerate. You will spend years trying to meet the standard only to realize there never was one. You were chasing a finish line that moved every time you got close. I once knew a man who spent 3 years drowning under the weight of that sentence. Every time he failed to satisfy a whim, she threw it at him. A real man would pay my debts. A real man would let me travel alone. A real man wouldn't need reassurance after being cheated on. He spent those years thinking he was the problem, thinking he simply wasn't measuring up. It took him losing everything, down to the last drop of self-respect, to understand that she didn't want a partner. She wanted a servant wrapped in masculinity. And the day he finally walked away, she didn't cry for love. She cried for lost control. Another phrase holds a darker truth, one most men refuse to acknowledge even while their stomach drops and their heart twists the moment they hear it. Then why do I need you? That sentence breaks the illusion completely. It tells you she's not looking at you as a person with emotions, history, or depth. She sees you as a function, a convenience, a solution, a tool. And the moment that tool malfunctions or doesn't meet expectations, she wonders aloud why it still exists in her orbit. When she says this, she is telling you that partnership was never the goal. Utility was. A man told me once that he heard this phrase from his wife on the day he lost his job. They had built a life together, raised children together, weathered storms together. But the moment his income disappeared, her affection evaporated too. She didn't say we will figure this out, or I'm with you no matter what. She asked why she needed him at all. It was in that instant he understood that his marriage had been a transaction disguised as love. He was valued only as long as he was producing. And the cruelest part was how calmly she said it, as if she were evaluating a household appliance. When a woman asks you why she needs you, she is revealing something irreversible. She is telling you she does not see you as a man she wants beside her, but as a tool she tolerates until a better one arrives. Nothing you do after that can repair what her mouth already confessed. You will spend days, months, years trying to compensate, trying to earn your place back, trying to prove that you are necessary, but you will never erase the fact that in her mind you are replaceable. Loyalty cannot grow in soil where utility is the only currency. And then comes the phrase that doesn't scream but quietly poisons. I didn't ask you to. Men who love show it through action. They fix things, they protect, they anticipate needs, they ease burdens without being told. It's not performance, it's instinct. And nothing cuts deeper than having that instinct thrown back at you like trash. You bring flowers after a long week, and she shrugs. You handle responsibilities so she can rest, and she dismisses it. You go out of your way to make life easier, and she tells you she never asked. What she's saying is that your love has no value unless it serves her on command. The spontaneity of your devotion means nothing. The intention doesn't matter. The effort becomes invisible. If you've ever had a woman tell you "I didn't ask you to," you know the feeling. It's not disappointment, it's erasure. It's realizing that the love you thought you were giving is landing on a surface too cold to absorb it. Your gestures turn to dust the moment they reach her hands, and the worst part is how quickly you begin to shrink. You stop doing things because you know they won't matter. You stop offering, stop caring, stop trying, until one day she accuses you of not loving her the way you used to. She punishes your attempts and then mourns their absence. That's not love. That's control wrapped in indifference. And it's in these moments, these sentences delivered with chilling calm, that a man must confront the truth he's been running from. She is telling you who she is. She is telling you how she sees you. She is telling you what role she assigned you long before you realized you'd been cast. These phrases don't start fights. They end relationships. They don't hurt because they are cruel. They hurt because they reveal a reality you didn't want to see. There's a moment in every man's life when he realizes the cruelty he's enduring isn't random, accidental, or emotional overflow. It's structured, it's patterned, it's intentional in ways he wishes it weren't. By the time he reaches this point, he's usually exhausted, bent out of shape by years of being the emotional shock absorber, the silent fixer, the dependable constant. And just when he thinks he's seen the worst, she unleashes another phrase that feels harmless on the surface, but carries a hidden message that strikes at the core of who he is. It's the kind of phrase that makes a man pause mid-step, question his reality, and wonder how long he's been living in a house that quietly despises him. "I'm PMSing." On its face, it sounds like a plea for compassion, a request for patience, an explanation for discomfort. But for certain women, it becomes a shield, a permanent hall pass for behavior no decent human should be allowed to inflict on another. You don't realize it the first time. You forgive it because you want to be understanding, because you've been taught since boyhood that a good man must absorb emotional volatility with a calm heart and endless tolerance. But soon it becomes a pattern: sudden explosions, sharp insults, objects thrown, lines crossed, respect evaporating the moment she feels an impulse she doesn't want to regulate. And when you finally gather your courage to address the disrespect, she smiles, shrugs, and says it again: "I'm PMSing," as if the statement alone erases the damage. But here's the truth men learn far too late. Physical discomfort may cause irritability, but it does not cause cruelty. It does not cause contempt. It does not cause character to collapse. A woman who values you may get emotional. She may be sensitive. She may withdraw or feel overwhelmed. But she will not use her biology as a weapon. She will not treat you like a punching bag simply because she knows you won't fight back. The difference between emotional humanity and emotional abuse is accountability. Some women ask for understanding. Others demand immunity. And the moment she uses PMS as a shield for actions she would never accept from you, she is telling you something you cannot afford to ignore. She believes she should be exempt from the basic rules of respect. I knew a man whose girlfriend used that phrase as if it granted her temporary dictatorship. 1 week a month she could insult him, break things, storm out, or vanish for hours, and any attempt to address it afterward was dismissed with a simple explanation: "I was hormonal." You know how it is. But what he didn't see at first was that her cruelty wasn't tied to a cycle. It was tied to convenience. It came when she wanted something, when she needed power, when she sensed he was beginning to question her behavior. The hormones weren't the cause, they were the excuse. And when he finally confronted her with facts, her reaction wasn't remorse, it was rage at losing the shield she'd been hiding behind. Biology can explain stress. It cannot justify disrespect. It cannot justify betrayal. It cannot justify emotional destruction. And then there's a phrase far darker, one soaked in entitlement and rewritten history: "You wasted my best years." It always comes after you've given everything. After you've invested time, energy, money, loyalty, devotion. After you've stood beside her at her lowest moments, supported her dreams, carried her burdens, and believed in her even when she didn't believe in herself. And one day out of nowhere she looks at you as if none of it mattered and declares that her time with you was a loss, an investment with a negative return, a chapter she wishes she'd skipped. Men underestimate how devastating this sentence is. It's not just criticism, it's an erasure of the entire relationship. It's a rewriting of history, where she becomes the tragic heroine and you become the thief of her youth. It means she has already disconnected from you emotionally. She has already imagined a life without you and decided it would have been better, and she has decided, consciously or unconsciously, to blame you for everything she didn't become, everything she didn't achieve, everything she now regrets. I remember a man whose partner said this to him at 32, after 7 years together. He'd stood by her during deep losses, funded her education, supported her through failures, moved cities for her career, and built a home with her. And still, she looked at him one evening, arms crossed, voice calm, and told him she wasted her best years on him. In her mind, the sacrifices he made were invisible. The devotion he gave meant nothing. What mattered was that she wasn't living the fantasy she believed she deserved. And in the absence of that fantasy, someone had to be blamed. She chose him. Here's what men don't realize until it's too late. A woman who says that phrase has already left. Not physically, emotionally, spiritually. She's detached from the memories that once mattered. She's detached from the moments you thought were milestones. She has replaced gratitude with resentment. And resentment, once born, never dies. You cannot negotiate with it. You cannot reason with it. You cannot love it into submission. Because the moment she decides her youth was wasted, she decides you never deserved it. And once she believes that, nothing you do will ever be enough. But the darkest phrase of all appears when she feels completely untouchable. When she believes you are trapped, tied down, immobilized by fear, obligation, or hope. If you don't like it, go find someone else. Those words are not spoken with sadness or fear of losing you. They are spoken with the smug confidence of someone who believes you won't leave. Someone who assumes you have no options, no courage, no backbone. Someone who assumes your love is a leash she can yank anytime she wants. It's the purest expression of contempt, not anger, contempt. The belief that you are too weak to walk away, too attached to detach, too afraid to face solitude. And she will only say this when she thinks she has total leverage. Kids, finances, shared assets, emotional guilt, social pressure, whatever she thinks binds you, she uses it as ammunition. And when you express pain or discomfort, she throws this phrase at you with a smile, daring you to do something she believes you never will. Leave. A man told me once that his wife said this after she drained their savings on needless purchases. She didn't apologize, she didn't explain, she didn't soften, she simply shrugged and said, "If you don't like it, go find someone else." She said it because she believed he was stuck, because she knew he feared the legal system, because she thought he lacked the strength to reclaim his life. And for 2 more years she was right, until the day he finally realized something important. She didn't fear losing him because she didn't value him. Every one of these phrases shares a single root: contempt. Not irritation, not stress, not momentary frustration. Contempt. And once contempt enters a relationship, it never leaves. You cannot fix it. You cannot soothe it. You cannot outlove it. Contempt is the silent death of connection, and every one of these phrases is a doorway into that death. There comes a point in every man's unraveling where he stops trying to convince himself that everything is normal. Not because the pain suddenly becomes unbearable, but because the clarity finally becomes undeniable. It's the moment he realizes that these phrases he has been swallowing like poison were never random slips, never emotional outbursts, never misunderstandings. They were tests, measurements, quiet experiments designed to reveal just how much disrespect he would tolerate before he broke. And most men, without ever meaning to, show a terrifying truth. They tolerate more than they should. They tolerate enough to lose themselves in the process. Men aren't destroyed all at once. They're worn down slowly, one phrase at a time, one dismissal at a time, one quiet insult wrapped in a smile, one twisted jab disguised as a joke, one cold comment delivered with the confidence of someone who knows you will stay no matter how deeply she cuts. It's death by 1,000 emotional incisions. And the saddest part is that most men don't even realize they're bleeding until years later when the wounds finally stop scabbing over. There's a man I remember well. He wasn't weak, he wasn't naive, he wasn't inexperienced. He had lived through real battles, real losses, real danger. But nothing in his life ever damaged him the way one woman did with just a handful of seemingly small phrases. He spent years trying to be understanding, patient, forgiving, reasonable. He thought love meant absorbing. He thought strength meant enduring. So he endured. Every time she diminished him, he told himself she didn't mean it. Every time she questioned his worth, he told himself she was stressed. Every time she dismissed his efforts, he told himself he could try harder. Until one day he woke up and realized he had become a stranger to himself. The fire inside him had dimmed. The drive that once defined him had collapsed. His confidence had been chipped away until all that was left was a man surviving on reflex, not purpose. She never hit him. She never screamed. She didn't need to. Her words were sharper than any blade. It always starts the same way. He thinks if he explains himself clearly enough, she will see his heart. If he communicates better, she'll understand. If he becomes more patient, she'll soften. If he proves his loyalty, she'll feel secure. But a woman who uses these phrases isn't confused. She isn't lost. She isn't misunderstood. She knows exactly what she's doing. She is shaping the relationship around her power. She is redefining his identity to fit her comfort. She is teaching him that his needs are optional, while hers are obligations. And each time he forgives what she says, he trains her to escalate. Contempt grows in silence, not the silence between arguments, the silence inside the man who no longer speaks up. The silence inside the man who has learned that expressing discomfort only earns him more contempt. The silence inside the man who has convinced himself that suffering is the price of love. That silence is what kills him long before he realizes he's dying. Men often ask when they should leave. They ask as if the relationship will give them clarity, as if the breaking point will announce itself with flashing lights and undeniable certainty. But the truth is much quieter. You don't leave when she says something unforgivable. You leave when you realize you've become someone you don't recognize, when you catch yourself walking on eggshells in your own home, when your stomach tightens at the sound of her footsteps, when you start apologizing for things any sane person wouldn't apologize for, when you start justifying behavior that, if done by anyone else, would be unacceptable, when your friends look at you differently, when your family notices you dimming, when you look in the mirror and see exhaustion where pride used to live. Most men don't leave when they should because they're not afraid of losing her. They're afraid of losing the version of themselves they thought they were building with her. They're afraid of being alone, afraid of starting over, afraid of walking into silence after years of noise. But solitude is not the enemy. Peace is not the enemy. The quiet is uncomfortable at first because you've forgotten what safety feels like. When a man has lived in emotional chaos long enough, peace feels unnatural. It feels foreign. It feels wrong. But that discomfort is simply the withdrawal, the body detoxing from the emotional addiction. A man once told me that leaving felt like walking out of a burning building and then shivering in the cold. He was shaking, disoriented, convinced he made a mistake. He almost went back, not because he missed her, but because he missed the familiarity of chaos. But as the days passed, he realized something he hadn't felt in years. His shoulders relaxed, his breath deepened, his mind stopped spinning. He didn't realize how much tension he carried until it started to leave his body. That's what freedom feels like at first. Not joy, not excitement, relief. There's another truth men learn in silence. Once you step away from the woman who spoke to you with contempt, the world begins to look different. You start noticing the way healthy women communicate. You start noticing softness where you expected sharpness. You start seeing accountability where you expected excuses. You start recognizing respect in its smallest forms. Healthy women don't test your boundaries. They don't question your worth. They don't punish your effort. They don't weaponize your masculinity. They don't rewrite history to cast themselves as the victim. They don't dare you to leave. Healthy women want you because of who you are, not because of what you provide. They appreciate your character, not your utility. They admire your presence, not your productivity. And once a man experiences that, even briefly, he wonders how he ever accepted anything less. It's like stepping out of a dark room and blinking into the sunlight. It hurts at first. The brightness overwhelms him. But eventually he adjusts, and for the first time in a long time, he sees the world clearly. He sees himself clearly. And he realizes he wasn't the problem. He was simply giving his heart to someone who never deserved it. The most painful part of healing is accepting that she will never understand the damage she caused. She won't see the nights you spent questioning your worth. She won't see the way her words circled your mind long after she forgot she said them. She won't see the pieces of yourself you sacrificed to keep the relationship alive. She won't see the way your confidence cracked under the weight of her contempt. And if you tell her, she won't care. Because if she cared, she never would have spoken those phrases in the first place. You cannot save someone who enjoys watching you drown. You cannot love someone into morality. You cannot fix contempt. The moment a woman sees you as less, she will treat you as less, and the relationship ends the moment you accept it. There comes a point where a man finally stops bargaining with the truth, not because he suddenly becomes stronger, but because the truth becomes too heavy to ignore. It's the moment he stands in the middle of his own silence and realizes the war he's been fighting was never about love, never about miscommunication, never about two imperfect people trying their best. It was about him trying to resurrect something that died the moment those phrases were spoken. The moment contempt entered the room, the relationship became a memory, pretending to be alive. Men often think leaving is the hard part, but the real battle begins after you walk away. It begins when the noise stops. When there's no one questioning your usefulness, no one measuring your worth, no one diminishing your effort. At first, the quiet feels wrong. The peace feels suspicious. The stillness feels dangerous. A man who has lived under constant emotional tension cannot trust calm. He doesn't realize how deeply her words rewired him, how long he's been operating in survival mode, how much of himself he's lost trying to hold a collapsing relationship together. And when that pressure finally lifts, the body doesn't know how to relax. The mind doesn't know how to rest. The heart doesn't know how to believe in its own value again. But the quiet becomes the classroom. The silence becomes the teacher. It's in those moments with no audience and no opponent that a man finally sees what those phrases really did to him. He sees how he dimmed his voice because she didn't like being challenged. He sees how he shrank himself to keep the peace. He sees how he stopped speaking up to avoid the eye rolls, the sighs, the sarcastic comments. He sees how he carried more than his share and apologized for not carrying even more. He sees how he accepted treatment that would have outraged him years earlier. He sees how much of himself he surrendered for a relationship that was never worthy of the man he was. But once a man sees the damage clearly, something inside him awakens. Something ancient, something masculine, something untamed. It's not anger, not bitterness, not spite, it's clarity. The clarity of a man who realizes he survived something he should have left long before it broke him, and with that clarity comes a shift. He stops asking why she treated him that way. He stops blaming himself for staying. He stops wondering how things could have been different. He stops imagining alternate outcomes. He stops bargaining with memories. He stops resurrecting a corpse. He begins to rebuild. The rebuilding is slow, almost invisible at first. He catches himself standing taller. He laughs, genuinely, for the first time in years. He goes a full day without replaying her words in his head. He makes a decision without anticipating her reaction. He remembers what it feels like to want things for himself. He feels the return of a confidence he once assumed was gone forever. And then comes the moment every liberated man experiences, usually quietly and unexpectedly. The moment he realizes he doesn't miss her. He doesn't miss the fights. He doesn't miss the criticism. He doesn't miss the tension. He doesn't even miss the rare good moments, because they were never good enough to justify the cost. That's when he understands the truth he couldn't see while he was inside the relationship. He never lost a woman. He lost an illusion. He lost a fantasy he built around someone who never had the capacity to match it. And once that illusion shatters, he stops mourning. He stops longing. He stops regretting. A man who finally sees clearly doesn't grieve what he escaped, and something else happens too. Something powerful, something life-changing. His standards rise. Not because he becomes jaded, but because he becomes aware. A man who has endured emotional warfare develops an instinct for contempt. He can sense it in a look, in a tone, in a seemingly harmless phrase. He doesn't tolerate disrespect, not because he's defensive, but because he's healed, because he knows the price of letting it slide. He knows the cost of staying silent. He knows the danger of allowing small things to grow into weapons. A man who has survived emotional destruction becomes allergic to anything that smells like it. And here's the part most men never expect. Once he raises his standards, the world responds. Women who thrive on manipulation, control, or entitlement avoid him. They see something in his eyes they can't use. Meanwhile, women who value respect, communication, accountability, and partnership are drawn to him, not because he's performing strength, but because he finally embodies it. He's no longer seeking validation. He's no longer eager to please. He's no longer addicted to chaos. He knows what he will and will not accept. And that certainty makes him magnetic in a way he never was before. But perhaps the deepest transformation happens internally. He starts seeing himself as a man worthy of respect, a man worthy of appreciation, a man who doesn't need to prove his worth to anyone, a man who understands that love is not supposed to feel like walking through a minefield, a man who realizes that peace is not boring, that kindness is not weakness, that mutual respect is not too much to ask for. He becomes a man who would rather be alone than disrespected. A man who would rather rebuild his life brick by brick than return to a home made of emotional shrapnel. A man who knows that the wrong woman can destroy him, but the right woman will never ask him to destroy himself. And when he finally understands that, when it settles into his bones, he becomes impossible to break in the same way again. Because true change doesn't happen when he leaves the relationship. True change happens when he leaves the version of himself who tolerated it. So here's the truth that sits quietly at the end of every man's journey through emotional devastation. Those 6 phrases were never insults. They were revelations. They didn't happen to punish you. They happened to wake you up. They showed you who she was. They showed you who you became. And they showed you who you were meant to return to. A man is defined not by what he tolerates, but by what he refuses to accept. And the moment you stop accepting contempt, you become the man you were always meant to be. Not a perfect man, not an unbreakable man, but a man who finally understands his worth. A man who knows he deserves respect. A man who refuses to shrink to fit someone else's comfort. You were never the problem. The problem was staying with someone who needed to make you small to feel big. And now you know better. Now you see clearly. Now you rise. Here is your life again. Take it back.